Hey, everyone. Welcome to Locked On Lakers for Monday. Brian Kamenetsky and Andy Kamenetsky. It's not over yet, Andy, but it might be over. Is it over?
We'll tell you next.
You are Locked On Lakers, your daily Los Angeles Lakers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Everybody for making Locked On Lakers your first listen of every day, Monday through Fridays, and sometimes on Saturdays and Sundays, we get a show up for you as early as we possibly can. However you get your podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts, always free for you, our listener / viewer, if you're watching on YouTube, Locked On Lakers on YouTube. Want to let you know that today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, where the game starts. There was a certain sort of, while nobody said it officially, Andy, a certain funereal feel to the postgame on Sunday following the Lakers' loss to Denver. Final score there, 129-118, Sunday afternoon at the Crypt. That doesn't technically end the Lakers' chances of making the play-in, but man alive, if they aren't putting the nails in the coffin and lowering it into the ground at this point.
Well, if they're not coffin shopping, I mean, frankly, they're behind the schedule.
Oh,
right
no,
now.
they've picked the coffin. Well, if they haven't picked the coffin yet, they're just going to throw them into an empty grave, like a dirt grave.
Hopefully it's, purple and gold. You at least stay thematic. You go down with the franchise ship. If people are not aware, and okay, I'm going to raise this point, then also I got to make a comment to some people on the YouTube channel. First of all, we've been getting a lot of people from either Locked On Pelicans or Pelicans fans in general coming in there to troll, to rub it in. We don't mind. You know what? This is what rivalries are about. There is a rivalry of sorts between these franchises because of the Anthony Davis backstory. The Lakers immediately won a championship after AD nuked his way out of New Orleans. Turnabout is fair play. As long as people are respectful towards each other, we don't care. That's what sports is all about, and we want the clicks and the views. I was about to say also,
regardless. The algorithm doesn't distinguish between people who are there to troll versus people who aren't.
Absolutely. Don't be a-holes to each other, and we're good with it.
There's a certain Republican spy shoes, too, feel to this whole thing.
Yeah.
Yes.
But, however, it is worth noting, and I don't know if these are Spurs fans trickling over with the Lakers chasing them and that long-standing thing, and same rules apply to you guys, or Pelicans fans just getting outraged in general. But I had made a joke because the Spurs are playing the Blazers back-to-back. It's just scheduling quirk happened to work out this way, but it's very fortunate for the Spurs as they're trying to maintain that 10 seed that they happen to be up against back-to-back, a Portland team that is tanking. And I said, well, to paraphrase what David Stern once said, the ideal finals would be Spurs versus Spurs, to which I had some people up in the comments section saying, I can't believe you guys are making excuses for the Lakers. Oh, yeah, like LeBron doesn't get all these different breaks. This is why people are coming at you right now. Okay, dude.
Everybody calm down. Settle down.
It was a joke referencing what David Stern said a couple decades ago about how the ideal finals would be Lakers versus Lakers because that's where the ratings are at. I'll just say this right now. If it makes you feel better, the league does not want the Spurs in the finals. You happy? They don't want your team there.
Yeah, so we'll get to some of the stuff, the commentary on how the players and Frank Vogel talked about this season as the show goes along, because it's relevant to really projecting forward about where we go from here. But this was an interesting game, Andy, because LeBron, who was clearly physically limited down the stretch Friday night against the Pelicans, didn't play on Sunday. Anthony Davis did, but was in the first half, it looked like he might not come back in the game. He actually removed his shoe on the injured foot. And that generally is shorthand for I'm not coming back. It's like when a football player is no longer sitting next to his helmet. When a basketball player isn't wearing his shoe, that's a bad sign. But Davis, to his credit, did come back into the game and played overall very well. He finished with 28 points, 9 rebounds, 8 assists. It was the kind of assertive effort and kind of gutsy effort that, quite frankly, Lakers fans wish they would be seeing more frequently from Davis. And, Russ played well, 27 points, 10 rebounds, 7 assists. They can't line all this stuff up. They have physically hobbled stars, and a very, very narrow window. And I know we've asked this question before, but each game it becomes relevant in different ways. Is it time to kind of call it a day with these two? AD said after the game, he said he thinks that the training staff told him that he can't make it worse. And, to his credit, he wants to play, but what are they clinging to here? LeBron, aside from the scoring title thing, which we'll get to in a second, what are we clinging to here with a guy who, as you believe, has quite literally a specific reservoir of minutes left in the NBA? It's not over yet, but it might as well be. What would you do?
Well, here's the problem with not shutting them down earlier. Optically, you've now backed yourself into a corner where if you aren't eliminated and you've been playing this long, it's like, well, why you're not going to play out the actual string of viable possibility, however small that viability
That's
may
a good
be.
Point. Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like you've gone this far.
The Lakers have 5. We're talking here before the Spurs play the Blazers, but essentially the Lakers have to win out their last 4 games and hope the Spurs basically lose out. That is their avenue to get in. And it's not even so much about what the Spurs can do, Andy. It's really about the Lakers. And they have not won consecutive games since January. I that is the number that matters to me more than they play this schedule, that schedule, that they've got Phoenix coming up next, the best team in the league, who would take no more joy in the world than to push the Lakers officially out of the playoffs. They resent the hell out of this team. Our Locked On Schadenfreude podcast would continue with Suns fans then entering our timeline.
Again, same rules. Come on in.
They're cool.
Water's great.
That is the subtitle of our podcast, though, right now. There's no reason to believe that this could possibly end well. And it really is time to think about the physical health of the 2 stars that are presumably going to be the players they build around going forward. Still.
Well, here's a microcosm of the entire situation they're dealing with right now. Like we mentioned, Anthony Davis overall played very well in this game. But and I think
on one leg against Nikola Jokic.
Right. And I think there is inspiration that can be drawn from his teammates, from the fan base, because there are still a lot of questions about Anthony Davis as the franchise face moving forward. There has been decreasing confidence among Laker fans in terms of his ability to really wear that mantle and take that torch from LeBron, moving forward, the wisdom of making him the guy, so to speak. So on one hand, seeing him play through this type of pain and discomfort, which fair or not has been the knock on AD throughout the course of his career, much less since he's been with the Lakers, that's something you like to see. However, he lost steam as this game went along. He was 1 of 6 in the fourth quarter. He became less effective as the game went along and was part of what has been a recent and season-wide long trend of fourth quarter collapses. And the fourth quarter, like many others this season, did in the Lakers. So it becomes this paradox where on one hand, there is a statement that is being made by AD and LeBron playing this thing out until it seems like there's truly no more reason to do it from any practical sense versus the practical reality of A, worried that they could do further damage, or B, it ain't going to make a damn bit of difference.
Right. And I mean, look, I don't think I'm putting words in your mouth when you say the reason AD slowed down in the fourth quarter is understandable.
Yeah.
It's not like earlier in the year where it was some of these moments where you're like, why isn't he being more assertive? He's playing on one leg.
No, his foot was clearly bothering him. He was laboring at times. He was flat out limping at times.
But anyway, other things other than the effort that the Lakers put in, which was, I think solid and kind of just disappointing. The results are disappointing. The effort was that, and it says a lot about the team. Were lineup choices that Frank Vogel made on Sunday. Once again, Austin Reaves did not play. Avery Bradley started, and Lakers Twitter was angry about it. And I think it is a pretty fascinating microcosm of everything that's been frustrating for this team all season long. Talk about it next.
Locked On Lakers brought to you by Built Bar. Eating smart but eating enjoyably has never tasted better. You can treat yourself without feeling guilty with Built Bar. If you've not tried out the Puffs, you are missing out on one of Built Bar's best tasting bars. The first ever protein infused marshmallow, fluffy, marshmallowy, not just a protein bar. They're a treat covered in 100% real chocolate. Some fan favorites like cinnamony churro, coconut marshmallow, banana cream pie, all of them are going to be your new favorites. It's going to be like trying to choose between your children or your pets, or whichever between your children or your pets you value more, which is your favorite. It is impossible. And look, most candy bars are like 200 to 300 calories of just empty nonsense. Most Built Bars, though, only 130 calories, only 4 grams of sugar, only 4 net carbs, but 17 grams of protein. And that's the good stuff. And as always, you can count on cool, unique, fun flavor combinations with Built Bars. So go to Built.com, use the promo code LOCKED15, get 15% off your order. Again, promo code LOCKED15, 15% off at Built.com.
So once again, Austin Reaves was a DNP-CD, and Avery Bradley was a starter. After the game, Frank Vogel, who had said after Friday's game that it was somewhat matchup based in terms of why Reaves sat, reiterated that it was some matchups and then some, the fact that Reaves has really struggled of late. Vogel pointed to some signs of fatigue. I think he was trying to charitably say the kid's not playing well, and I am sitting him because of it. And it obviously, Andy, whenever Avery Bradley appears in the lineup at the expense of Austin Reaves, or frankly anybody, it makes people angry. And Sunday was no exception.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing, and we talked about this after Friday's game when both Reaves and THT didn't play. Talon did end up playing against Denver, and
played reasonably well, I thought.
Yeah, he played reasonably well. We both think that ankle that cost him some games has still been an issue for him. But with Reaves, it's one of those things where it's not, I think, what I would have done, because I like the potential upside of what could happen for Reaves playing either alongside LeBron or AD on Friday, or even AD on Sunday, more than I like the potential upside of what could be there with Avery Bradley. But, and I also think, to be honest, the stage where we're at right now, realistically speaking, you might as well just get more reps for Reaves.
I think to me, that's a bigger question. But go on. Yeah.
To me, in the end, it's one of those things where in the wash, I doubt it makes that big of a difference one way or the other. So even if it is the quote unquote wrong decision, as wrong as any of this can be, I don't necessarily care, really, because I don't think it really impacted the game one way or the other. And there's good reason to think that. Both of these games were fairly tight. And it's not like the Lakers fell out of this in a way that, I mean, forget whether or not you think Austin Reaves could have saved it, but just reflects bad lineup choices in general.
There was a period in the season when it was patently obvious that Austin Reaves needed to play more, and quite frankly, Avery Bradley needed to play less. Or at the very least, Austin Reaves needed to play more. They've been so banged up, it's hard to keep certain people out of the lineup depending on what position they play. But Vogel went to that. Vogel did play. Austin Reaves has played a lot especially for an undrafted rookie free agent. 20 basically since the beginning of January, about 24, 25 minutes a night, including a lot of starts. He has played poorly, not just struggled, he's played poorly over the last 10 or 15 games. If you look at the last 10 games, he's shooting about 30% from the floor, about 20% from 3-point range, a little beneath that actually. And his net rating, partially because his offensive rating is tanked, his net rating is one of the worst on the team, where earlier on in the season, it was one of the best, even when he wasn't putting up great numbers. And I say this not to pick on Austin Reaves. I think he's had a great season, and I am excited about the potential for him to be a solid rotation player for the Lakers going forward, particularly given how useful he's shown himself to be on a good team, or at least around good players. This has never been a good team, but you get my point. If you feel like you need floor spacing because Russ is out there, because AD is back, because you kind of need to play Dwight at least a little bit, and all that, then you need to play Bradley more. The evidence would point to Bradley being a more reasonable choice than Reaves, or at the very least that Bradley should get minutes. And I think in the micro, you have to look at these decisions and say, does this make sense for today's game? In the macro, you can look at a lot of other choices. And I don't even see this as a mistake from Vogel. It was a very reasonable, to me, lineup choice, but I think fundamentally, I agree with you, wasn't going to be the thing that ruined it. I mean, Bradley was a -9, but Monk was a -12 and Davis was a -10. And I think this was mostly a function of them being on the court in the fourth quarter when the game got away.
Well, I mean, you could look at there were sections of this game where Will Barton, who played really well, at 25 points, 8 of 12. I know you do. 8 of 12. He's like your favorite role player in the league.
He is absolutely my favorite role player in the game. There was you go on a second, but there was a great moment in the game in the second half when Barton Melo ended up posting Barton up, and they were both kind of smiling about it. Like they explained a lot of it on the ABC ESPN broadcast. And I was just thinking to myself, here are two people who just really like playing basketball.
Yeah.
And I think like in this moment, like that was fun. That was like, 12 seconds, but I really liked it. And I do love Will Barton.
But there were a few possessions where they were setting up Will Barton off screens, where they were specifically targeting Avery,
no question,
and looking to put, basically looking to pick him off with screens or just put him in a blender in general. And it worked. And this was not a game where the defenders of Avery Bradley, because of his defense or, that hustle, that tenacity, would have much to hang their hat on. Would it have been any better with Austin Reaves? Would they have targeted him as much, as successfully? I don't know. It is in a lot of ways indicative of the choices that Frank Vogel has to make, because some of the floor time lately has been taken up by guys like Wenyen Gabriel or Stanley Johnson, for who
everybody, by the way, on Lakers Twitter wants to see. Why aren't these guys playing more? Young legs, athletes and whatever. But
right, the returns have been more diminishing for those guys, but you have to put them out there for pure size reasons. Like they need guys who are longer, more athletic. In the case of Stanley Johnson, just stronger. Like, right. There are times when they're looking to put Stanley on DeMarcus Cousins or on Nikola Jokic, which, putting aside the fact that it may not work, it's not going to work with Austin Reaves.
You can't do that to Austin. And
And DJ Augustine needs to be playing, because they need somebody who at least represents an outside threat, and at least somebody that they know is a competent enough floor general. Is DJ Augustine who you ideally want out there? No.
These are all pick your poison options. And I think one of the things that fans, and I'm not trying to pick on people, we do the same thing. But what people focus on are the choices. Like, pick your poison. Okay, which poison are you picking? The choices and this and that. The problem is it's all poison. It's not the choice you make. It's that it's all poison. It all kills you in the end. That's the problem. And the Lakers have made up a roster where every choice ends in death.
It's like Brian,
and I get the frustration. And I understand that you can still optimize your lineups. But it's a lot more difficult to optimize your lineups when there isn't a good choice than when you're trying to sift through all bad choices that change daily. And, there is no data sample size that works for the Lakers in any kind of continuity. And it's all poison. And so when your options are all poison, I'm not going to dwell on Vogel's choice of poison. Not even to say that they can let him go. I don't think he's been great this year, but he is, to me, still not the problem.
Yeah, I mean, it's similar to the choice that a death row inmate eventually gets for, how would you like to die? You
Right.
get, I guess, the best in your mind of what is an
Lethal
unideal,
injection firing squad,
right, an unideal situation. You
suboptimal choices.
right. So it it's I do wonder a little bit about, how much, I guess, leeway, more or a longer leash Austin might get if he were a third or fourth year player
Sure.
versus a veteran. And, because coaches, and I don't just mean Frank Vogel, coaches in general will give a longer leeway and have more tolerance for mistakes from experienced players than non-star rookies. Even taking into account that Austin's gotten a lot of chances this season with the context of where they are at this year, it might seem more extreme to Vogel, and therefore he would look to make the extreme decision of not playing Austin at all.
Yeah.
But either way, it's
But he's done
just
that. He did that to Avery though too. Like just
sure.
flat sat him
Look,
down.
in
There's
the
only
end,
so much space in the rotation.
in the end, I think the biggest reason you would criticize Vogel for doing this is just not recognizing, give Austin Reaves every possible rep that you can give him, because in the end,
Right.
we know where this is likely headed regardless.
Although as we record, Andy, the Blazers are up by 8 at halftime on the Spurs. So you never know. I just, it is a little like, some of the criticism of playing Dwight on Friday. Like, yeah, they've been better without, with the big three without a center, except AD just got back. You're playing Jonas Valanciunas and you don't have Carmelo Anthony. So it's like Dwight's got to play. It's like the context matters in micro game to game decisions. After the game, guys were talking a lot about what if, Andy, what if the team had stayed healthy? And that is a massive question that the Lakers will have to answer over the offseason. And we are going to introduce it next.
Locked On Lakers brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline.net is your number one source for all your betting needs and sports info. Find all the latest sports developments, including this week's Masters Championship odds, podcasts, and reviews for all the different leagues this season. Up on BetOnline.net, you've got a 2022 Masters tournament preview. Lets you know John Rahm is considered right now the player to beat. You've also got an MLB preview with American League, National League. Baseball is going to be upon us soon enough for real. So you want to be up on all the best information before you start laying down a little cash. And BetOnline is your continued source for all your sporting wagering information, including live betting, esports, and scores. So head to the website today or use your mobile device. Learn more about the trends in action. BetOnline, where the games start.
So it was certainly striking to me, Frank Vogel, after the game Sunday, talking very much like a guy who knows he's being fired, because he is. But talking about how proud he is of his guys for sticking through it and talking about that, but also a lot of what if, what if we had stayed healthy, and it's a shame that we never got a chance to see this and all that stuff. That was reiterated by Carmelo Anthony when he spoke to the media. It was reiterated by Anthony Davis. It was less reiterated by Russell Westbrook, who just doesn't seem to give a bleep anymore. Something I think we'll probably discuss on Tuesday's show.
Mm-hmm.
This question of what if they had stayed healthy? It's a shame they didn't get to see what that looks like. Lakers got to answer this question, because how they approach the offseason is essentially tied to what they think the answer to that question is, and whether or not they would have been successful this year had Davis and LeBron played 65 games each. This is obviously something we'll get into a ton as we go through into the offseason, but I worry that they're going to lean too much on the injury thing first and foremost, and not really dig into the question. That's, I think, the biggest concern you could have as a fan.
Well, okay. In thinking about their potential reaction, what, if any, information or leaning do you glean from the fact that they had been playing pretty well last year before the injuries during the second half of the season took over?
Mm-hmm.
And they ended up going into the playoffs. AD gets hurt. They lose in the first round to the Suns. They had been up 2-1. I do think sometimes people forget Chris Paul was injured during that
Sure.
series, and the Lakers failed to take advantage of that, even acknowledging they didn't have AD. But either way, there seemed to be a fair amount of recognition hearing Frank Vogel talk, hearing Rob Pelinka talk, hearing various players talk about, we felt pretty good about where we were and how we had been playing before guys started getting hurt. Dennis Schroeder was getting COVID, not COVID, all that different stuff. And then they ended
COVID up, multiple times throughout the season.
Yeah,
not getting COVID.
As I like to call it, he had COVID, not COVID.
Uh-huh.
They made radical changes this offseason.
Again.
But after hearing a whole bunch of confidence expressed in where they had been. So it makes it very, I think, unpredictable to know exactly what direction they would go, because I did not think they were going to make massive changes, in part because it seemed to me that they recognized, hey, we had been playing pretty well. It wasn't perfect. We still got to figure out how to score easier.
Sure.
Like, that has been an issue even while we won a championship. But it seemed like it was going fairly well. And then they really revamped this roster in ways that I don't think anybody really saw coming.
No,
I don't even mean specifically Russ. I just mean
but like,
that grand of an overhaul.
But specifically Russ is obviously important, to the point that you and I recorded a podcast, like an entire podcast about, like, multiple segments on how terrible an idea this was.
This was when it was just rumor faces,
when it
not
was
when
just
they
a
made
rumor.
the deal.
When it was just a rumor. Like, this can't possibly be real. Egg on our face, by the way. So here's, I do think your look back at last year is an instructive one, because last year there was evidence that the team was good. They were 21-6 before the wheels fell off from a physical standpoint. And I maintain they would have won that series if Davis didn't get hurt. The differences, though, between that season and this season, there was evidence last year they were good. There has never been evidence this year that this year's team is good, ever. Injuries have a lot to do with that, but the evidence has never been there. The other thing is, you just mentioned Schroeder, Harrell, Kuzma, KCP, whatever. The biggest difference between last year and this year, other than the scope of the injuries, is the middle class of the team, is the guts of the roster. And the lesson that I think they should take is that you can't de-emphasize that middle class. I tweeted out on Sunday, one of the fatal flaws of the Lakers roster is they don't have anybody in the Will Barton level of NBA player. I'd love it if it was actually Will Barton who they could use, but like that caliber guy. Like, he's not an all-star, but he's good. He's like Kyle Kuzma, not an all-star, but like really good. And they don't have anybody like that. It goes LeBron, AD, Westbrook in theory in that category, and then Malik Monk. I mean, I guess THT, maybe Carmelo Anthony. Yeah. I mean, depending on the day. Malik, who's been inconsistent, did some really goofy things on Sunday.
He's been goofy lately.
He has. He's gotten goofier. Little Charlotte creeping into the game.
Six assists against 5 turnovers against Denver,
and weird ones, like just goofy, like a little bit goofy. Where you fouled Barton at the end of the first half. That was bad.
On a half-court heave.
That was a little. It was 3 feet beyond the top of the arc. It was a little closer than that. It was a terrible foul. But like, those guys matter, and I think that we'll break this down extensively as we go on. But my initial gut reaction to this is they would have been obviously better if LeBron and AD play those games. But we're talking about a team that is probably 6th or 7th, I think, in the conference, and not 1st or 2nd.
I mean, it's hard to know, because part of this equation involves Kendrick Nunn representing a live body, and he did not play at all this season.
But somebody's going to get hurt. I mean, you can't have it.
But rarely does one of your players miss an entire season on top of all the other injuries that the Lakers dealt with this season, which were really extreme. And like, you and I both thought that they were going to have a successful season this year, but we also thought that the bar for success would be difficult to reach. We gave them a benefit of the doubt that they could eventually figure out how to do this, in part because when you have LeBron and AD presumably healthy for enough of a season, that gives you a very good starting point.
Right.
And so, but we both always acknowledged this is going to be really complicated. We both thought they made it more complicated than necessary, and they made this more difficult than it had to be, but that there was a way that ultimately they could find success. And the biggest concern that I would have would be that they could use the extremities of everything that happened. And there is no way around the fact that this roster, even when you take into account how much more difficult they made the process to be good than it had to be. Like, again, the difficulty that they added to the process was tangible and not necessary. There were still extreme circumstances that dictated the struggles this season. You can't remove that. My concern is that they're going to decide that played more of a role ultimately, or Frank Vogel played more of a role ultimately, or we misjudged Russ specifically, but we had the right idea in looking for that third star. We just misidentified the star, and they're going to look at a lot of other either people or overall situation and not point enough fingers towards us, the decision makers. This can include LeBron. This can include AD. Anybody who had a real voice in this offseason, we done effed up.
Yeah. I would say I mean, it's hard to know exactly how wrong. We've all said, assuming health. That was always the caveat. But I thought Russ would play better. I thought it would be awkward, but I just thought he would play better. And I thought the supporting cast would be better, which it might have been had the other guys stayed healthy. But there were some,
and had none existed,
right, and all that. So, but I was, I missed some of the stuff for sure.
The difference is it doesn't matter if we're wrong.
No, it doesn't.
It matters if they're wrong.
Yes, it does. So, all right. So this is a topic we'll certainly explore a lot going forward. Locked On Lakers on YouTube. Make sure you're subscribing to that, whether you're here just to support us or just to troll. YouTube doesn't know the difference. So thanks to that. And we will be back on Tuesday talking about Russ, a little bit perhaps of Carmelo Anthony and his honor that he received on Sunday. Very cool for him. And yeah, everyone have a good day.